So what's the difference between an observational study and an experiment? Well, it's a pretty significant difference, actually. The difference between an observational study and an experiment is that in an observational study, the researcher does not influence the responses in any way. They just stand around and watch. Whereas in an experiment, the researcher deliberately applies a treatment before observing any of the responses. So let me give you an example here. In an observational study, say I wanted to do a statistical study on cars, driving habits of people when they come to a yellow light. And I stand off to the side and I'm just watching to see what the cars are doing. So the first car comes by and it's a yellow light and they stop. And then once it turns green, they move on. And I record what happens. And then the next car comes by and it turns into a yellow light, and this car speeds up and goes through the light because they're in such a hurry. And then I watch the next car, and it's another one, and it turns yellow, and ooh, it speeds through because it needs to get going as well. And the last car that I observe turns into a yellow light, and it actually slows down and stops, waits, and then once the light turns green, it moves on as well. So in that case, all I'm doing is just watching. I'm observing to see what the cars, or I should say what the drivers are doing. Now, how can I turn this whole thing into an experiment? Well, instead of me just standing around watching, what if I stand right next to the light, right on the corner, and in my hand, I have a radar gun. I better write this on there. This is a radar gun right here. So I am standing here where the drivers can see me, and I have just applied a treatment. The treatment in this case would be seeing the radar gun. And we want to see how drivers react to a yellow light when there is a radar gun, a person standing with a radar gun, right next to the yellow light that they're coming up on. So in this case, the first car comes by and they see the radar gun and they stop. And then the next light comes by, light turns green and they go through, the next one comes by and this car's coming, oh, he sees the radar gun and he stops as well. And then the light turns green and they move on. The next car is speeding up and then, oh, the radar gun makes them stop as well. And then it turns green and they move on. And then there's another car here and they're speeding up and it turns yellow and they just go ahead and speed through the light anyways. So that's the main difference between an observational study and an experiment. In the first case, I was just watching to see what happens, and what I was doing did not influence what the drivers would do. Whereas in the second example, that would be an experiment because I am applying a treatment. In this case, seeing the radar gun is the treatment, and how, once I see how the drivers react, not only am I watching what they do, but I'm applying this treatment so that I can see how the treatment affects their driving habits.